All right, well, today we're going to be talking about release time religious instruction in Ohio. How many people have heard of release time religious instruction? And basically what this is a method of instituting religious education in public schools and how they get around the Constitution cases. And I have a presentation about it. And let me share my screen for the YouTube people. All right, so this is an updated presentation I gave in the fall, and we'll get to it here. The objectives that we're going to accomplish today is define what release time religious instruction is and the legal aspects, introduce the major provider of this program, Lifewise Academy, and its founder, Joel Penton. We'll discuss the issues with Lifewise and RTRI. And I use RTRI instead of saying release time religious instruction all the time in public schools in Ohio, and find out what we can do to control how groups like Lifewise operate, if not stop them completely. Oh, and feel free if you have any questions to let me know that you have a question, and we'll try to address those. All right, so while we will talk a lot about Lifewise Academy, I personally oppose release time religious instruction in the public schools, no matter who's doing it. Secular, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, whatever. I just don't think those activities help the children, and they're more disruptive to the educational process. You can oppose release time programs and be religious, and it doesn't change your beliefs or force you to change your beliefs. It's not anti-religion if you oppose it. It's not a freedom of religion issue. It's a time, manner, place issue. And it's also a political issue related to Christian nationalism. Yes?
I'm sorry. I want to pull this up on YouTube. What do I do? What do I...
It is search for Toledo Humanists.
Okay.
That's the channel.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And it's this issue matters because children are required to attend public school, and so religion in the school should be scrutinized very carefully. All right, release time religious instruction is when with the parent's permission, public school children attend a religious class during the school day. Since 1948, these classes have to be off campus, and since 1952, they cannot be operated by the school district, and you can't spend tax dollars to support it. RTRI programs have been happening in Ohio for at least 80 years in some format, and I know my mom said that they had a class in her school when she was going to school, in elementary school. And there are religious programs that meet before or after school, but they're not considered RTRI. They're like the Good News Club, Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Those are the ones that meet before or after school.
Well, this is primarily religious affiliated people taking your children off school property to indoctrinate them.
Right, teach them the Bible, right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm wondering, where did this come from? I mean, there's always been religion in the school.
Yeah. Well,
and the way back when.
Yeah.
But how did this happen?
And that's what we're going to talk about.
Oh, good.
You said that.
There's two Supreme Court cases that cover this. The first one is McCollum v. Board of Education, which most secular people should be familiar with. And basically that meant that public schools couldn't teach the Bible in class, in school during school days. They couldn't support it. And what they would do is, like when my mom went to school, that's what McCollum said was unconstitutional, where you go to a class during the school day, like you go to gym and then you go to Bible class. The Supreme Court said not to do that. And the main reason was because children have to be there. It's mandatory attendance policies. So they're not free to leave. And so that's why it was ruled unconstitutional. The second case that Lifewise and a lot of these Christian nationalists promote is Zorach v. Clausen, which was 1952. A group of New York City school parents sued And they had a program where they left school during the day, went to Bible class, and came back. And the Supreme Court said, well, that's different than McCollum, so that's constitutional because it's not on school grounds. They don't spend tax dollars on it, and they set it up on what the rules were for it to be legal.
Did parents have to ask for them to?
Yeah, they still have to get
Like a
parental.
field trip.
Yeah, it always requires parental
Sort of like a
permission.
field trip, okay.
So they have like a form they have to fill out. So Zora Atchby Clausen set up that parents have to get permission. It's held off school grounds. It's voluntary mainly for the parents, and I'll get to some of that here in a little bit. No expenditure of public funds, and no district staff is allowed to oppose it, support it, or teach the class. So you can't have teachers on the clock teaching the class during the school day. They have quite a few retired teachers that teach it, but they can't have like a math teacher currently teach it.
Can they teach it after school?
The district teachers, yeah, if it was after
On
school,
their own time.
yeah, if it's on their own time, right. Now, the Ohio law that concerns all this is Ohio Revised Code 3133.6022, and it was adopted in 2014. This is how long I've been covering it, paying attention, is when this first came up. And again, it puts all of that Zora Atchby Clausen rules in the law. And a couple of things I wanted to point out on this is that the sponsoring entity has to maintain attendance records and make them available to the school district. So you know that Johnny's going to religious class and he's not just skipping school. Transportation is responsible for the sponsoring entity. So the school does not transport the kids. They also have, the sponsoring entity has to have liability insurance, and they also have to do background checks on the people that work with them. And then the student assumes responsibility for any missed schoolwork. Now, what was changed last fall when I was giving this talk was that they passed a law that required RTRI policies in the public schools. Previously, schools had the option of having a policy. Now, having a policy doesn't mean the kid couldn't leave school to go to Bible class. All the policy was like a framework of how a sponsoring entity could come in and work with the school district. That's all it was meant for. The original Ohio Revised Code, all it had in it, besides the rules, was for high school credit. So this Democratic representative from the Cleveland area wanted kids to be able to get school credit for attending religious classes, and it was for high school kids. That was the main thrust of it. And it was Representative Bill Patman. He was concerned that children in public schools were being punished for using religion in their assignments, like book reports and art projects, and that wasn't the case. There was a couple anecdotal stories about kids trying to do a book report on the Bible and failing the class, and that was just scattered here and there. It wasn't a systemic thing.
Was it possible that it was just a bad book report?
And it was it could be it was a bad book report, or in the cases that I read about at the time, it was kids not following directions. Like they had specific directions that they had to follow, and instead they did a book report about Jesus. And it said, and this was House Bill 171, and then the law was never meant to allow for mass movement of young kids off campus for a Bible class. It was always geared towards the individual student. And the revision that we're talking about that requires the schools to have a policy was House Bill 445. That stalled out in the committee when they had a change in the chairperson, because last legislative session, the Republicans were fighting amongst themselves. You had like the Derek Marins and some other people were fighting for control, and one of the casualties was the chairperson of the Education Committee. So when they brought in a new person in, she was a former school board president and a retired teacher. She didn't like the bill, so it stalled out. So what they did was then they copied and pasted it to Senate Bill 293, and there were literally hundreds of people that testified in committee hearings, both in the House and the Senate. And I sent stuff in. Other people, I think they had over 200 submitted testimonies opposing the bill, from school boards to students to people like me, and they opposed it, and they still passed it on. Senate Bill 293 was in the end tacked on to the anti-LGBT House Bill 8, which is commonly known as Don't Say Gay, but they called it the Parents' Rights Bill, and passed near midnight on the last day of the legislative session. And then ironically, our senator here in the Toledo area, Paula Hicks Hudson, was absent for that vote. And I called her office and asked her why, and her staff did not know why she did not vote. She didn't vote at all. She didn't vote yes, she didn't vote no. She just didn't vote. She wasn't there. The House Bill 445, the original, was championed by Reverend Gary Click from Fremont. He's also the one that championed the ban gender affirming care bill. And yeah, he's a tool. I don't like him at all. And then Representative Josh Williams from the Sylvania area also supported House Bill 445. And during the floor debate, threatened school districts if they tried to circumvent the new law. And he actually said on the floor, F around and find out. But he didn't say F. He just said FAAO. And then they would come back and make the bill more detailed. And although the revision benefits Lifewise Academy, it also applies to any third-party entity that removes children from campus. As long as the group follows the thin requirements in the law, the school board can't stop it from happening unless they include requirements in their RTRI policy. So the people that I worked with Honesty for Ohio Education. We pivoted and started working on model policies, and the school board association that does model policies, they came out with one, and so that's where we pivoted to help out with that. The outside entity also is not required to be religious, because they can't do that because of the First Amendment. They can't only leave it for religious people, and only that it is offering religious indoctrination off school grounds. All right, moving on. Lifewise Academy was founded in 2018 by Joel Penton. He's a former, his claim to fame was he played for Ohio State as a linebacker. I think he was a linebacker maybe. Then he became a minister and had a ministry where he did fake character building assemblies in schools. If people aren't familiar with that, they go in, they do this thing about character, and at the end they invite the kids after school or on a Sunday to a church to proselytize to them, because they can't proselytize to them during the school assembly. And usually they get paid to do this, and it's a mandatory assembly. But it's cover. It's a cover. And so now he's McDonaldized it into Lifewise. And his sister got him interested in it because they were doing it in Van Wert. They had a program in Van Wert, because that's where he's originally from, back in 2012, and he just kind of borrowed the thing. Oh, and as of 2024, they report that more than 30,000 public school students are enrolled in the program all over the country. And their stated goal, and they've said this in public, is to reach unchurched children in public schools and turn the schools into religious schools. The public schools are their mission field. That's all they're about. They're about converting. And I had some, I do a Secular Left podcast, and I have some video of them actually saying, we had to get these kids before they turn 13, 14, and then they'll come to church. And that's their goal. That's what they're doing, is they're trying to recruit new kids.
So, question on that. So, a recent, what was it, a Pew research showed that there's now, and this is probably paying off because they're starting to see an increase in the number of people affiliated with church groups and such in this country. It's starting to turn around a little bit because.
Yeah,
because
it's actually it's stabilized.
Right, instead of hemorrhaging
Right.
out like that.
But I did talk to a political scientist, Dr. Hume Navarro Rivera, who does a lot of secular things, and he's looked at it too. And he said usually if you grow up as a non-religious person, you almost never become religious.
Right.
Almost never. And so that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to reach those kids that are not religious, because on the off chance that they'll interest them.
Right, and anecdotally, I'm seeing that with some people I know that are suddenly becoming wanting to learn more about
Yeah.
the Bible and such, and don't understand.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem, if I did that as a kid too. I used to visit, my friends were in a Baptist church. I used to go to their services all the time, and they would invite me over. They had their youth group ironically watching Star Trek on TV with pizza. I went for the pizza.
Right.
It was free pizza. I was poor. I didn't get pizza very often when I was a kid, so.
Does this Lifewise business still have to have parental permission?
Yes. Yeah, they still have to have parental permission. And then my thing that I was thinking about too was the kids don't have a say in it. If they don't want to go, Lifewise will tell the school district to get them to go once they're signed up. Or the parents will be upset that their kid won't go.
So do the kids not like it?
Some kids don't, but what it boils down to is if you're a kid in elementary school and you have an opportunity to leave school and do something that you think is going to be fun, you're going to go no matter what.
No, I get it. It's like religion in the prisons. I have a friend in Iowa who was incarcerated for drug things. I mean, he was in a secularist group and whatever like that. And Brian said that, hey, the preachers will come in. And he says, well, hey, would you rather go to church or would you rather sit in your cell?
Right.
I mean, that's even more extreme. I
Yeah,
get it.
that's a good analogy, because that's how it works. I mean, I was that way. My favorite time in school was either gym, believe it or not, gym or field trips. And so if I could leave school during the day, that was just even
And with
better.
prisons, it's even worse because a lot of times they end up making some of the released prisoners preachers. They have problems getting jobs, right? And so they end up, more catastrophic nonsense.
I've heard that they get the kids to get their friends to come because they have pizza.
Right, because they are not allowed, Lifewise is not allowed to recruit in the school. They're not allowed to go into the school and say, hey, kids, come. So what they do is they give the kids candy and trinkets to take back, and the kids are like, this is cool. You get free candy. And so that brings the kids in. Lifewise Academy also has relationships with many of the groups that helped develop the Project 2025 book that we all heard about before the election. They even sponsored the National Convention of the Moms for Liberty, that really bad group, in 2024. They also reported that they earned $35 million in donations, and they also get millions and millions of dollars in grants from Christian nationalist groups. But yet they require their local chapters to raise money for their own programs. And they just bought a building for a headquarters for $2 million in cash in Hilliard. They chunked down the cash and paid for the building.
It sounds like Republican.
It is. Yeah, it is. They're all intertwined.
Yeah.
And then here were some of the concerns that we had with House Bill 445 and Lifewise Academy. They lack transparency. They refuse to operate before or after school. They've told schools, we don't do before or after school. And if you don't want the program, force us to do before or after school, we won't come here. They don't conduct the same background checks as school districts do for teachers and other workers that work for the district. They use church background checks that aren't nearly as thorough. In fact, I just learned yesterday that they've switched background check providers at least 3 times in the last 2 years. And then there was a story about a Lifewise director who found out that she had her teaching license revoked because she was sexting a student and lost her job. But they hired her at Lifewise. And Lifewise says, well, she wasn't convicted, so it didn't come up in the background check. But she got reported to the state, so if they had done a real background check, they would have found out she couldn't get a teaching license. The law is clear about no support from public school districts, yet cases abound. Perrysburg, they talk about it in their newsletter they send out to parents all the time. All the time, they just send it out. Some schools, I think Waterville, they allowed them to set up a table at some kind of school-sponsored community event. Their thinking was, well, we let the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, so we have to let them. But, the law is pretty clear. They don't have to. And then the theology taught is from the Southern Baptist Convention, which is very extreme. So even if you support religious education for students, this one is pretty extreme.
And don't you think it's just a matter of time, though, until different religious factions start getting into the content of this? Because, there are Christians outside of the Southern Baptist Convention who may not appreciate that particular approach. I mean, heavens, there are a zillion different,
Yeah, there has been some pushback. Some Catholic dioceses have told their parents not to enroll their kids. Some evangelical churches in the rural Northwest Ohio have told their parents not to enroll the kids because they're not evangelical enough.
Right.
So,
Not extreme.
yeah, not extreme enough.
Not crazy enough. It shouldn't be at all. It's the same. My sister taught first grade in Iowa for 38 years, and when they're talking about proposing prayer in school, she didn't want. She was a lifelong Presbyterian, just like my mother, but she didn't want to be responsible for the prayer. I mean, everybody's all over the board.
Right.
Right.
She didn't want to touch it. It belongs someplace else.
And then some of the shady dealings with Lifewise, they tell prospective districts that everyone wants Lifewise, and that's not the case. It's usually about 25 to 30% at most that want it in a district. I know there's been some districts where they have a program and they are begging for teachers, or they've had to cut back because of low enrollment. Findlay was one. They were going to expand to 3 buildings, and they eventually had to cut back to 2 because they didn't have enough kids and they didn't have enough volunteers. They cite a marketing study that they paid for and based on cherry-picked data, saying that it's great, you got to do it. They don't vet the signatures on their website interest petitions. Anybody can go to their website and pick a district and say, I want Lifewise, and they don't vet whether or not you're even from that district. So a lot of places, particularly we know here in Northwest Ohio, they've had churches gang sign petitions to try to get it everywhere. They pressure and intimidate school district people who oppose them. One story we heard is a school board president was invited to coffee with a organizer from Lifewise and was basically told, if you want your levy to pass again, you'll let Lifewise in the school. The other one is they use elected officials to promote them to districts. We were talking about John Houston. He wrote a letter to the Hilliard School Board and demanded that Lifewise be allowed in. David Yost has written opinions that favor Lifewise. And so they use all that. Yeah, in fact, when we had these testimonies about these bills, there were more people that opposed it than supported it because they didn't need to show up because they knew it was in the bag. They knew that the legislature was going to pass it, so they had token people show up. Some more. They teach young children extreme versions of Christianity. They don't have to abide by a student's independent study plan. A lot of struggling students or disabled students have ISPs. They don't have to accept all children who want to attend. They use schools to, as I said, to pressure children who miss time at Lifewise. They'll send an email, hey, Johnny hasn't been at Lifewise for a couple weeks. Could you check on that for us? And they use candy and other favors to allure classmates who don't attend.
So can you give an example of one of the extreme versions that they, which was the very next? So the-
Well, right. Well, it's coming up. Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I have a slide about that.
Oh, okay, well,
All right.
I'll
But this is from a document from their manual for their program. It says, Lifewise claims to be teaching character and using Bible stories to do it, but here's an example from their official teacher's handbook about some issues they might encounter from students. And the one I have highlighted is gender identity. It says, God created people, male and female, equally and distinctly as an intentional reflection of his image. Sexual orientation, God uniquely designed a man and a woman to experience sexual intimacy together. God considers other kinds of sexual relations outside of this design to be sin. And then, of course, they are against sex before marriage.
Instead of marriage?
Yeah, instead of marriage. Lifewise actually teaches that God is first, parents are second. And that's ironic coming from people who talk about parents' rights. And this says, when faced with the choice to obey God or our parents, we should always obey God first. That's what they teach the kids. And then here is an example of their character teaching using a Bible story about human sacrifice. It's the story about Abraham. Angel comes and tells him he has to murder his son to prove his loyalty to God. And then, so Abraham does what he's told. He goes up to the altar and it's about ready to kill his son. And then the angel says, oh, hold on. You're good. That's okay. They teach that in kindergarten through third grade. And plus, there's also a thing about they didn't allow people to look at their curriculum. They refused to do it, and they actually sued a guy from Indiana who went through the training class to get access to the curriculum and then posted it online. That's how I got this example, is I got it from him. And they sued him for copyright infringement. So now you have to basically sacrifice somebody in order to look at it. And they let you look at it for 48 hours. You can't copy it or anything. Now, you would think if this was a great curriculum, they would want to share it, but they don't. But they do not, and that's why. Human sacrifice as a character building thing.
For children.
For children.
Here, got it. This is how you become a psychopath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we were talking about some clergy disagreeing with it. Some Catholic and Jewish clergy oppose Lifewise because it isn't the correct religion. And at least for Catholics with their theology, some more extreme evangelicals even oppose it because it's not conservative enough. All right. So this is where Lifewise is active now. The red is active programs. The green is they have like a 10-step thing. And then the black is blocked or on hold, but those are going to be changing because now they have to have RTRI. Bowling Green blocked it, so did Sylvania. That's why Josh Williams got involved, is because the parents came to him and complained. So he's the one that supported that bill. And this is on a website by Keith Comer. It's called Respect Our Public Schools or Respect the Public Schools. I forget. I have it at the end here, the link. And you can click on these and it'll tell you what buildings and everything.
Can I clarify something?
Sure.
Can they block it?
No.
No, not anymore.
No, as long as they follow the Ohio Revised Code, they can't block it. The school, they can't even, the school district can't even police the curriculum. So they could have, I don't know, Nazis, as long as it's religious,
Religious Nazis.
religious Nazis.
Non-religious groups can do it too.
Oh, yeah.
So a Nazi group could
Oh, yeah.
recruit the kids.
Yeah, the,
out of school to do it.
Yeah, the Satanic Temple started a program in Marysville this past school year, and called the Halian Academy. But and they got a lot of pushback from that. People didn't want it, but it's like, well, you open the door.
Do they use public school transportation to get kids to these?
No, a lot of the
Just wondered, because that would be funding, basically.
Yeah, a lot of the programs I've looked at, especially ones nearby, they have a church next door, and they walk the kids.
Okay.
If they can't do that, then they get a bus donation. So they get the little bus, and it's painted red, and it says Lifewise on it.
Okay.
But they're not allowed to use any school equipment at all.
But school workers help organize it, right? I mean, there's a certain amount of baloney that goes with getting the kids from here.
Oh yeah, and that's the argument we've made.
Disrupts
That
school.
right, it disrupts the school and it spends money because that's time that they're taking away from what they're supposed to be doing. But
And
they
there
don't.
isn't enough anyway for the
Yeah,
teachers to
right.
do.
And this is recent. This is the Ohio budget. What Ohio does that really infuriates me is instead of going through the whole process of introducing a bill, having a hearing, and all this stuff, they stick stuff in the budget. They did this for all the anti-abortion regulations that recently went away because of the change in the Constitution, is they would stick it in the budget. Now, in Ohio, if something is part of the budget, you cannot challenge it. You could probably file a lawsuit, but you can't do a petition drive and put it on a ballot and have it repealed if it's in the budget. So they stick a lot of this divisive stuff in the budget. In this year, this particular budget, they stuck in that there's only two sexes, man and woman. That libraries have to put certain materials behind locked doors so that kids can't see it. What else did they do? I can't think of anything else offhand, but yeah, so they do that. So they did this. What it was is that there were some school districts, because the law is so thin, they were doing their RTRI policy saying that the kid could only leave campus once per quarter or per semester. One class per semester. Now, Lifewise wants to do it every week. So they got their friends I know what it was. I'll mention that in a minute. So they got their friends in the legislature to stick this in the budget, which would mandate that schools have at least one period per week for RTRI. And for high school students to have 2 units of high school credit per week. Now, I think that violates the Supreme Court decisions, because the Supreme Court decision and the Zorach decision said it left the policy up to the schools. And this is mandating a religious class during the school day.
I don't understand how that could go in the budget. I mean, how is that monetary?
They just add something to it, like a few $100s to something. I wish if anybody wants to do a petition drive to get something to change in the Constitution, I would support that, where the budget can only deal with money, period. You can't change laws like that. That's what they do, is they change laws. The other one was the Dayton Library put in menstrual products in the men's room. And their representative, Rodney Creech, didn't like that, so he had put in the budget to prohibit menstrual products in men's restrooms in the state of Ohio, in public facilities.
I'm doomed.
Yeah. So if you get a nosebleed, you'll have to have a woman go in and get a tampon out of the women's bathroom. Yeah. But anyway, so that's the shenanigans they like to do. And then this came up this week. Likewise, their lawyer is First Liberty, which is also a Christian nationalist group. And they threaten to sue schools that don't allow kids to bring back treats and trinkets. They also complained about the background check requirement. Yeah. And I can tell you that, and this is what secular groups tend to do too, is we'll send strongly worded letters to school districts. And they want to avoid lawsuits. So they'll change their behavior because they don't want to get sued. So that's what they're doing. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get them to change, but the organization that helps with the model policies, they have a lot of lawyers too, and they've already looked over the model policy and they think it's fine. So what can you do to protect the public schools? Well, first of all, pay attention. Attend school board meetings, look at their agendas and find out what's going on, because a lot of this stuff happens basically in the dead of night. It's like Lifewise will just pop up one day and try to get in there. You won't hear about it until they show up. Join with other like-minded people to oppose RTRI programs. Encourage districts to add guardrails to their policy, since the state law has very little. Document violations of the law, and if possible, complain to the district or the state, or complain to national church state groups like Freedom from Religion or American Atheists, ACLU. And in a climate of Christian nationalists trying to end diversity, equality, and inclusion, happily point out that RTRI is DEI, because that's what it is. It's trying to include religious people in the school day.
That first one, if you can't attend it in person, there are some school boards that are virtual, so you can actually watch them online. I know the Washington School District locally here they post theirs online as well as in person.
I think they do a live stream, don't
Live
they?
stream.
Yeah.
And it's recorded.
Right.
So you can go back and watch it later if you need to.
And that's basically what I did all last year, is I went through the different districts and looking at the agendas and the minutes and trying to find information for the different places.
I'd like to know specifically, maybe you're gonna talk about this, about Toledo Public.
Toledo Public, they had a program at Birmingham Elementary, but it went defunct. And you'll see this a lot in like the urban districts, less participation. It's mainly in the rural school districts where you see a lot of it, like Defiance. They claim they have a 90% participation rate. But like Findlay, they had, I think, less than 30 kids participate in 2 buildings. So that's why they couldn't expand. So a lot of time, like I said, Lifewise will say everybody wants this, but that's not true. There's a select, it mirrors the population. There's maybe 25, 30% of the population that's extreme religious, and they want their stuff catered to. The rest of us, we really don't care, or we don't want it. But they're the ones that are in charge. They usually get on the school boards, and they're the ones that fight for it and get it done. And that's why we have it today.
Be curious to see how it's playing out in the Amish communities.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. But I do know, like the state of New York, they financially support the Jewish schools. I forget what they're called, yeshivits or something like that. And I just saw an article the other day where they're thinking about ending that support because they support them based on the idea that the kids that attend that school will get a comparable education, and they found out that they don't. So, that's the thing. And again, Lifewise is not accountable. So if something happens to your kid, it's going to be on the school district. The school district's going to take the heat. So basically, like I said, me and Honesty for Ohio Education and some of the other groups are pivoting to trying to help establish model policies. And these are just some of the ideas that I came up with at one time. Stating that all classes in school are considered core classes, not to be missed or skipped. Toledo Public has that. They changed their policy, and another Northern Ohio district have done this. In the model policy from the School Board Association that many of these school districts are a part of, it says graded, that they should be graded classes. So basically what you're doing is you're limiting Lifewise to lunch or recess. And in many places that's what they do. Require the same level of background checks that they have to do for the district. Now the advice that they get from the School Board Association is if you make it stricter, you'll be more entangled with the group. So so they have two choices. They can require that they do it monthly or quarterly and give them the information, or they can just sign a thing saying we've checked and they're all good. So it just depends on how involved the school districts want to get with them. Require that the programs happen before or after school. And like I said, Lifewise will not come to your school if they are only allowed to do it before or after. Now, with the change in the state law, they probably won't be able to do that anymore. Require that students can only be released to a parent or guardian each time a student attends a program. And that was proposed in the Beaver Creek School District. Basically, they have a volunteer from Lifewise come and collect the kids. What this would do is it would require parents to go to the school and sign their kid out and take them to the class every time, which I think is reasonable.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, especially since they're not doing good background checks.
Right. Require that the program accept all students who have permission to attend and that students can opt out with or without parents' permission. I think it should be the kid should have a say. I really do. And prohibit the programs from giving students gifts or candy. Many of the school districts, they have adopted that you can't give gifts or treats or trinkets to kids. And that, like I said, that's a common addition that they've gone with. And then you need to be aware of a catch-22. Some legal representatives for some school districts have made the argument that might cause those revisions to miss putting in strong guardrails. They're being told that the stronger they make the policies, the more they would be entangled with the groups. And if the policy is different from how they treat groups before or after school, it might open them to a lawsuit. That I don't believe is true, because they are creating a separate category of groups. Since it's not before or after school, it's during the school day. And I think there should be stronger rules for, especially if you're removing kids during the school day. It's not like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts.
Well, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts aren't during the school day.
No.
I mean,
That's what I mean. It's a different category. So here are some of the websites. The Honesty for Ohio Education is a good group. Secular Education Association. They used to be called Parents Against Lifewise, but they've expanded their thing to include any type of religion and school type thing. Reclaiming Their Time is another group of people that I work with. We do public records requests, and I forgot to mention, why didn't I make a slide for that? Back in September, how this started. The Worthington School District down in Columbus canceled their Lifewise program. And the reason why was that they were doing it during lunchtime, and they weren't getting reimbursed for the lunches. And so they want to make sure that the kids eat. So they can't, that was one of the reasons why they canceled it. The background check was another. So what Lifewise did is they lobbied their buddies in the State House and got the Ohio Education Department to unilaterally say that Lifewise program or RTRI programs were a school function. And so they could be reimbursed for school lunches. That contradicts the rules in the USDA, the federal government that pays for school lunches, where they say RTRI, they specifically point out RTRI programs are not school functions. And so the Ohio Department of Education is paying for it. And they unilaterally did that. And so I did a public records request for the Ohio Department of Education because I wanted to know how that decision was made. And I have the memo that went out, and like I said, it was just, they just decided. They didn't run it by the Attorney General or any lawyers or anything. They just decided to give they're giving tax dollars to schools to support RTI program.
Now, who's they?
The Republicans.
I'm not saying what individual, but what entity of the government decided to put it in the bill?
No, they didn't put it in the bill. They did a policy thing.
Okay.
They sent a memo to all the school districts saying that we have decided that RTRI programs are a school function, so if you have it during lunch, we will reimburse the school for the school lunches that they take off-site to consume.
Is it the Board of Education?
The Ohio Department of Education and Workforce, or whatever they call themselves now. But as I said, they unilaterally did that. It contradicts the federal rules at the time. Of course, with the current administration, they could end up changing it. But that's how I got the memo proving that through a public records request. And that's another thing you can do too is we just, when Lifewise pops up, we know that they're just not suddenly picking a district that they've already communicated with other people in the school district. So we do public records requests to get those emails and all that stuff. And it's just what you're doing is you're keeping an eye on them and noting any problems, anything like that. And so that was with reclaiming their time. I work with a couple of people, 3 or 4 people, we do that. And then Respect Public Schools, that is where that chart came from. That's Keith Comer. He is in the Tiffin area, and he's a data analyst guy. He does a lot of stuff, and he does some good videos. And that's always a good source of information. Any questions? Any additional questions?
Clarification.
Sure.
Let's say that a child is abused, like with the sexting. Does that fall back on the public school, or does that fall back on Lifewise?
Good to ask. It's unclear. They are not, since Lifewise is not a school function, they're not part of the school district, they're not covered under that reporting law. But they're supposed to report things like that. I know there's one thing, they had a kid that acted out and punched a Lifewise teacher on the bus, and they reported that to the school. But as far as child abuse, I don't know. It's up in the air whether they would or not. I don't think that they had a policy. I'm trying to think. They had a policy they sent out to their programs about documenting everything, but it didn't specifically say turn this over to the school district. So basically, they want to cover their own keister, but they're not covered under that mandatory reporting law. And that's another reason why we don't like the program. Any other questions? Yeah, Ruth.
Might it be helpful to point out, how they are not speaking for even all Christians or the Bible. I keep thinking, I attended Canterbury Forum in Cedar Falls. A professor had started it with speakers once a month during the school year from either UNI or Wartburg College, theologists, whatever, and on Christian topics. And they all comments and questions were, I really enjoyed it because it was an open discussion. But one spring they had a series on the evolution of the Bible and whatever. And it's like, because Jesus supposedly predicted that the end times, the kingdom of heaven had come before everybody died who heard him. A couple of the Gospels say that. They ignore that, of course. But because then the Christians thought, well, you know, hey, it's like you don't have to have children because it's the end, right? We shouldn't have children. And so in Matthew 19, it goes into this, and I probably would have missed it had I not gone to the Canterbury forums when I heard the professors discuss it. But if it's like, it's really astounding. It's like they say, you know, you shouldn't have sex because it's going to be the end. I mean, you don't need children, right? Whatever.
Right.
And it says, his disciples say to him, if the case of the man be so with his wife, it is not good to marry. But he said unto them, all men cannot receive this saying, save they to whom it is given. For there are some eunuchs, which were so born from their mother's womb. So, hey, they are not all men and women from the time they're fetuses, right? Which were, and there are some eunuchs which were made eunuchs of men, and there be eunuchs which have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. He that is able to receive it, let him receive it. So we should encourage, I mean, hey, shouldn't they encourage?
Yeah, that's one path that you can take to challenging it is talk about the theology. It just depends on what area that you're in. Usually you try to get the lay of the land, what kind of views are out there. You could do that. That's one way of doing it. Because I'm all about forming a coalition, and like I said, get together with people that are like-minded. And so you might find people that are against it because of the theology. You can work with them, even though you don't want it at all. Like I don't want it at all, but somebody that's against the theology, they might still want it.
Quit it, I think. But
Yeah.
This actually, I don't think most people even know that's in the Bible.
Yeah, most Christians haven't read the Bible.
It's like,
Yeah.
that eunuchs are a good thing, but everybody can't do it.
Yeah, which Bible?
Only the good
And it gets
parts.
reviewed
Only the good parts.
every year
Yeah,
and
and the
changed.
right wing don't want to expose their children to the facts of life, right? They didn't like sex ed programs I was in Flagstaff and they were fighting it like crazy. My perception about Bill Clinton and the blue dress and all that was not so much that he did it. It was on the evening news and they had to explain to their kids. No.
Yeah, they do that. A lot of religious people will cherry pick stuff like that.
All the time.
Yeah.
Where does this issue intersect with classes like teaching the Bible as literature or as poetry or as history? Or is that whole issue more of a college level?
No, it doesn't have the Lifewise program and the way that the formatting is for RTRI right now, and there's different groups, not just Lifewise. There's a new group that popped up in Hancock County recently too, is they use the Bible to teach character values supposedly. So they'll teach the stories, the boy that cried wolf and all that stuff. They'll teach that. It's like going to Sunday school. What you're talking about is an academic exercise, and you can do that in school. That's not allowed. You can study poetry or the history or whatever, or find out King James was really, really insane and things like that. That's fine, because you're not talking about whether it's true or not.
Right.
You're just talking about how it was written in the different books. So I don't have a problem with that either. It's just when you start saying that the stories are true or you should live your life how we think you should live, and that's when I have
Indoctrination comes in.
the indoctrination part. Yeah. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
As usual, this is really good. It's always very good. Every time I hear it, it's better and better.
Yeah, like I said,
On it.
I've been following this issue since 2014.
Yeah.
And I like that first bill, the first time that they put that law out, You know, I think I sent in a testimony at that time too. So, and it always gets me when I talk to people when these groups that I work in. A lot of times the first thing they'll say is, "How's that legal?" And it's like, well, you got to look at the whole history and look at the thing, and it should be illegal, but it's not.
So next year, the midterms, we're gonna see throughout all of Ohio, there are a lot of school board positions that are open. And there's a lot of groups that are trying to get people to sign up to become, to serve on the school boards. So those are always, if you're not able to do it yourself, find people, support those that are, and definitely attend those school board meetings.
And I will add to your point that the Christian nationalists, they do it stealthily. They won't come out and say, we want to teach the Bible. They'll do something else.
Right.
They're like, we want accountability or something.
Oh, yeah.
They'll mask it that
It's
way.
the way there's a subterfuge for that. And the other thing is that it looks like there's, there's a lot of positions, just open positions. So just be aware, learn your facts, follow through, and definitely vote. I mean, that's important that we all do that. One of the things that's coming through right now in the state legislature is they're trying to do away with the elections of school board,
The state school board.
School board.
Yeah, get rid of that.
Just have only appointments, which obviously is going to go to a specific political party that's going to be running.
Yeah, and you know, that's one thing you say, do your investigations of these candidates. That's
That's
hard for
It
people
is,
to
and
do.
Yeah.
You have to search one.
How do you do, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I do that, but a lot of times it's challenging.
It's challenging.
So, an organization like yours, do you vet candidates? I mean,
Well,
just looking at their bio just doesn't do it.
our particular group, we really can't do that
Right.
because that's a minefield for our tax exempt status.
Yeah.
But we can recommend groups that do that, like League of Women Voters, they do it.
Yes.
The Blade, they do profiles on candidates. But what I would say is if you have particular issues that you're concerned about, I would formulate a couple of quick questions so that you ever meet these candidates in public, and there's usually a public forum for these candidates. Even school boards have public forums for candidates. Ask them, do you support RTRI? Or are you a Christian nationalist? You can even ask them that. And just get them on the record of either denying it or saying they are or whatever.
Or do a web search on their name.
Yeah, that too.
It might pop up, you don't know, but when I worked in Fulton County, Georgia, I basically handled some communications to our local group. I mean, this is where I discovered how hard it was. Because I was trying in the newsletter to give them links to this person's bio or something. And as you get down into the local level, sometimes there's nothing out there.
Right.
But if you can go to the internet and find out, well, do they belong to a church? What other groups are they affiliated with? Sometimes you can go to Facebook, and pull them up and see. But a lot of them were on Facebook, but there was absolutely nothing about their activities or what they do.
And it
So
doesn't hurt
it's
to
really hard.
call or reach out to your representatives now. Like for example, Paula Hicks Hudson, you just mentioned earlier, and this was, she was absent during the vote.
Yeah.
And it's like, we should be calling her office and asking, why weren't you there? And just having, it might be just, if it's just one person that's asking, they're gonna ignore it. But when 11 of us in here.
I plan, if I see her in a public forum, I'm going to ask her
It
again.
makes a
So,
difference.
yeah.
It makes a difference when you start hearing numbers. And I was listening to a podcast with, not a podcast, it was Heather Cox Richardson was speaking with Senator Angus King of Maine, and he said for his office, and this is probably true for many others, they do read it. The best way to contact them is not necessarily by phone, but send them an email. Their office receives those emails. they tally those up, they get an idea of how people are shifting on different topics. Better yet, send a letter. And through the USPS, you're actually doing two things there. One, you're actually supporting our United States Postal Service, which is in jeopardy. And two, they're going to have a physical copy there, which
You think that, well,
it does make a difference
they
according
keep
to.
all that paper?
Yeah, well, they
They tally, they
Yeah.
summarize it and tally it, and,
This
yeah.
is good for.
But I will say too,
But not
oh,
for
sorry.
national.
You can do it for any of them.
You can send snail mail to Washington.
Sure.
But when Bruce Braley was my congressman in Iowa, he pointed out that after
I wouldn't send it.
9/11, it goes to Maryland, and by the time they search it, sometimes it's not readable, but it's definitely delayed.
Right.
So, but if you're gonna send snail mail to a national person, send it to a local office.
Yeah, exactly, that's what I was gonna say.
right, and also too, the Congress people, they limit, if you go to their contact form on their website, they limit it to constituents.
Right.
So you have to put in your zip code, so you have to find out their zip code.
I got around that a long time ago, because it's like, they tell it by the 9-digit zip. So I pick an address for one of their offices, look up on the USPS for the last 4, and I just put one of their addresses and pretend it's like when we learned to write a business letter years ago with an inside address. I put my email and my right phone number, because phone numbers, you don't tell where you are anymore.
No.
Right, emails
Yeah.
don't. And, it gets so you end up too many emails, because no matter what you complain about, they're gonna think you are a supporter, and you end up with too much garbage in your inbox. But no, there's a way to get around it. I've done it for decades. Well, at least one.
Right. Anything else? Any other questions? Yeah.
Well, related, but probably not for today, I would love for you to do a presentation on vouchers and voucher funding.
Yeah, that is something I am working on now. I'm in a working group on that. And yeah, almost $1 billion in vouchers to private schools in the state of Ohio, and they want to give them more. They want to give $600 million to the Cleveland Browns for their stadium,
Yeah.
and they only want to give $500 million to public schools.
Get together with Heather on that, she's doing a lot of.
Yeah, we're on the same
You guys are
group.
on the same group?
We're working on model legislation. As a matter, I'm on the subcommittee, model legislation. I think she's doing the looking up the data.
And stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, there's a thing on the Ohio Department of Education website where you can find out what schools are getting voucher money and how much they get. And it's mind blowing. It's just mind blowing.
And like what Heather was telling me the other night, she was saying that there's a percentage of school districts in Ohio that do not have private schools anywhere near them. So they can't, they're paying the vouchers.
Yeah.
They're not getting
They're not getting any benefit,
any benefit.
however you put it, yeah.
And there's a large percentage of that money are going to people that earn $200,000 or more for those school vouchers.
Yeah.
So there are people that are already that are paying for those, that would be paying for their children to be going to private schools, and all this is doing is just, it's robbing from the rest of us to support those that are upper middle class.
Yeah, and there was a story this week, Arkansas. They're having to redo their voucher law because people were using it for country club memberships, Prime memberships, vacations, because there wasn't any rules about it. They would just send you a check. Because that's how they have to do it. They can't give, especially if it's a religious school, they can't send the religious school the check. They have to send it to the parents, and the parents send it to the school. And so parents are using it for other purposes because they're already paying for the school.
Right.
And they,
This is nice little bit.
well, and that's just it, and the fact that then that money ends up not being used for, say, someone in the lower financial classes of your city. It was supposed to give them a choice too, not just the rich.
Yeah, I think it's
kids.
like 90%
Yeah.
in Ohio is not it's not low income or something. 90% of the vouchers go to people that already go
Yeah,
to private school. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm working on that. It's like, it's in the budget and people are looking at it, so hopefully I'll have a presentation about it soon. We'll find out.
And if you wanna have a fun, watch some fun, we've had some really good, the Toledo Troublemakers has had some really good presentations and such. That Thursday one, we had somebody that was talking about self-defense as well. So, and how to break free of somebody trying to grab you or, in case you're at an event where something like that happens. And she was a sensei at a martial arts school that teaches that. Another one that was talking about, stress relief, breathing exercises for relieving stress, because we're all under a lot of stress as it is. So things like that. And so we complement each other with our SHoWLE folks here too.
All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up for today, and I really appreciate everybody that came today. And we have the room till 12, so